Mo3's mother broke down crying in a Dallas courtroom, in front of everybody. Tears running down her face, pain she has been carrying for years finally spilling out, where everyone could see it. And Yella Beezy, the man sitting on the other side of that room, the man she believes is responsible for all of it, looked over at her and laughed. Not a flinch, not a moment of guilt, just a laugh. And that laugh changed everything about how people see this case. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are getting into the full story. The rise of Mo3, the rise of Yella Beezy, the feud that turned deadly, and everything that led to that courtroom. Stay locked in, because this one goes deep. Let's start with Melvin Abdul Noble Jr. Born in McKinney, Texas, in 1992, he grew up on the north side of Dallas and came up in a city that was not exactly handing out opportunities to young black kids trying to find their footing. Dallas had a rap scene, but it was not one the industry was paying close attention to. To make it out of that city and onto a national stage, you had to be undeniable. Mo3 decided early on that was exactly what he was going to be. He gravitated toward music with a purpose, describing himself in interviews as a gang member turned rapper, someone who used the pen as a way out of a life that had a very predictable ending. His debut mixtape, Shotaz, dropped in 2014, and even at that early stage, you could hear what made him different from everyone else in his city. He was not rapping from a distance or performing a version of the streets for people who had never seen them. He was rapping from inside it, the real conversations, the real grief, the real tension of a neighborhood that did not forgive mistakes and did not hand out second chances. Mo3 built his following the old way. Mixtape by mixtape, show by show, he connected with Boosie Badass, who had become one of his idols. And that relationship opened doors. His 2015 project Shotaz Reloaded hit number 14 on the Billboard rap chart and climbed to number 2 on the Heat Seekers chart. His follow-up, For Indictments, topped the Heat Seekers chart entirely. By the time he released Shotaz 3.0 in 2018, he had a hit on his hands, Everybody, a track that showcased his ability to tell street stories with melodic vulnerability. The kind of song that crossed over because it was honest. Complex's Pigeons and Planes named him the most listened to Dallas rapper on Spotify. That is not a small thing. That is a statement about reach, about a city falling in love with its own son. In February 2020, he and Boosie released a collaborative mixtape called Badaz Mo3 that debuted at number 136 on the Billboard 200. He was working on new material, building toward what looked like a true mainstream breakthrough when November 11, 2020 happened. He was 28 years old. He had 3 kids. He was on the phone with his manager when the world changed. Now let's talk about the other half of this story. Marquise DeAndre Conway was born in October 1991 in Dallas. He grew up in Oak Cliff, the same kind of city that Mo3 came from, a neighborhood where survival was not a given and success required outrunning options that most people had already accepted. He started releasing mixtapes as a teenager, building credibility in the Dallas underground the slow way, grinding for years before the mainstream caught on. His 2016 debut Lightwork established him regionally, but then 2017 happened. That's On Me was a slow-burning trap record with a country flavor underneath it. Something that felt simultaneously like Oak Cliff and Texas all at once. The song went viral the way records go viral when they are real. It was not manufactured energy. It crept up the charts, hit number 56 on the Billboard Hot 100, and suddenly Yella Beezy was not just a Dallas rapper. He was one of music's most exciting new voices. The remix brought in 2 Chainz, T.I., Rich the Kid, Jeezy, Boosie Badass, and Trap Boy Freddy. His 2018 full-length Ain't No Going Back entered the top half of the Billboard 200. His music surpassed 1 billion plays across streaming platforms before the decade was out. He opened for Beyonce and Jay-Z on the On the Run 2 tour. He collaborated with Pharrell, Chris Brown, Gucci Mane, and Quavo. In a matter of years, Yella Beezy had become not just one of Dallas's biggest artists, but one of hip-hop's most commercially viable acts coming out of the South. 2 Dallas rappers, both rising at the same time, both from the same city, the same streets, the same world. And according to prosecutors, that proximity was exactly where the trouble started. The public timeline of the feud between Mo3 and Yella Beezy traces back to around 2017, though the roots may run deeper depending on who you ask. What is documented is that as both artists began ascending simultaneously, tension emerged in the space between their lanes. Mo3 was vocal about his grievances in interviews, on social media, and in his music. He claimed that his exclusion from a 2019 concert at the Star in Frisco, a major show headlined by Yella Beezy, Future, and Juice WRLD, was not an accident. He said he showed up, got arrested on an outstanding warrant at the venue, and believed that Yella Beezy's camp had set that situation in motion deliberately. Yella Beezy denied those allegations publicly. Mo3 also maintained that forces connected to Yella Beezy had worked behind the scenes to block his movement up the industry ladder, to limit his access to certain stages and platforms. Whether those claims were entirely accurate, partially true, or the perception of a man who felt targeted, they were documented and public. Both artists gave interviews where they addressed the tension. Both, and this is critical, publicly denied having active beef with each other at different points. The contradiction between what the streets were saying and what both men said publicly created a fog around the entire situation that did not clear until Mo3 was already dead. What prosecutors now allege is that the public denials were cover, that underneath the music industry posturing, the tension had calcified into something that could only end one way. But here is where it gets real. The streets were not waiting on prosecutors to figure that out. Long before any indictment, long before any arrest, people in Dallas hip-hop circles were already saying it plain, that Yella Beezy had put a price on Mo3's head, that the bounty was real, that whoever caught Mo3 in the right situation was going to get paid. That is what was being whispered, then said out loud, then repeated everywhere after Mo3's body hit that freeway. The industry knew something the courtroom was only just beginning to catch up to. And when the indictment finally dropped in March 2025, a lot of people in Dallas were not surprised. They were just waiting to see if the law had finally found what the streets had already concluded years ago. November 11th, 2020 started like any other midday in Dallas. Mo3 was traveling northbound on Interstate 35E near Clarendon Drive, south of the Dallas Zoo, heading toward what his manager believed was a film shoot. At approximately 11:55 in the morning, a black Chevrolet Camaro pulled alongside his vehicle. A masked gunman got out of the camera roll. Mo3 saw what was coming. He got out of his car and ran. He ran southbound on a packed freeway in the middle of the day, trying to put distance between himself and the shooter. He was not fast enough. The gunman pursued him on foot and opened fire. Mo3 was shot multiple times, including once in the back of the head. He was transported to a local hospital and later pronounced dead. He was 28 years old. The scene was caught on surveillance cameras. Dallas police released footage of the shooting. It was brutal to watch, and it confirmed one thing immediately. This was not a random crime. This was an ambush. Somebody knew where Mo3 would be, had a vehicle positioned, and had a shooter ready to go. The investigation began. A man named Quan Dontrell White was indicted for Mo3's murder in February 2021. A second man, Devin Maurice Brown, was charged in April of the same year. Both were identified as connected to the actual shooting. White would later plead guilty on federal gun charges connected to the incident and is currently serving more than 8 years in federal prison while still facing state charges. For years, the name behind the alleged payment, the person who prosecutors believed had turned a feud into a contract, remained uncharged. That changed in March 2025. A Dallas County grand jury indicted Marquise Conway, known as Yella Beezy, on a charge of capital murder while remuneration. That specific charge carries one of the heaviest meanings in Texas law. It means the murder occurred as the result of payment or the promise of payment. It is not just homicide, it is murder for hire. Conway was arrested on March 20th, 2025 and booked into the Dallas County Jail on a $2 million bond that was later reduced to $750,000. He posted that bond and has been under house arrest with electronic monitoring ever since. He pleaded not guilty. His name was Yella Beezy. He was 33 years old, and he was now facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in a Texas prison, or worse. Now let's break down what the prosecution is actually bringing to this trial, fam, because the case they are building is not simple, and it is not just street gossip dressed up in legal language. This is a serious evidentiary argument with multiple layers, and you need to understand all of them. The financial piece is where prosecutors start. According to reporting on the indictment and case filings, investigators allege that Conway withdrew $40,000 in cash within a few days of Mo3's killing. Prosecutors intend to present that financial evidence to a jury as part of their argument that payment changed hands between Conway and Q1 White. Financial records from JP Morgan Chase Bank were subpoenaed to testify at a pretrial hearing ahead of the original February 2026 trial date. That is not circumstantial. That is prosecutors going directly to the bank to establish a paper trail. Then there is the music. In an amended notice of extraneous evidence filed in February 2026, Dallas County prosecutors identified 4 of Conway's songs that they want admitted into evidence at trial. Keep It in the Streets, On Your Head, Hitters, and Take 3. They argue these lyrics are not just artistic expression. They argue the content directly references paying for violence and putting money on someone's head. During a pretrial hearing, Detective Eric Barnes took the stand and walked the court through specific bars from those tracks, testifying that the language about hiring violence aligned with the murder for hire theory prosecutors are advancing. Barnes also testified that Q1 White, the alleged shooter, appeared on stage with Conway at a concert shortly before Mo3 was killed, which the prosecution argues demonstrates that White was someone Conway trusted and had direct access to. 2 of those songs, Take 3 and Gassed Up, prosecutors allege were sent by Conway to a co-defendant via text message on the actual day of Mo3's murder. If true, that is not a rapper texting songs to a friend. That is a potential digital footprint connecting the defendant to the crime in real time. Beyond the music and the money, prosecutors plan to paint a broader portrait of who they say Conway is. In filings, the state claims he has long-time ties to the Crips and an affiliated crew called Get Rich Cartel. They plan to present his criminal history, which includes weapons charges, drug charges, and assault case connected to a 2024 civil verdict in which a jury sided against Conway after Mo3's manager, Brandon Rainwater, accused him of assault outside a Dallas nightclub in January 2020 as evidence of a pattern of violent behavior. Some of those charges resulted in reduced sentences or were dismissed, but prosecutors argue they established a picture of a man who operated with violence as a tool, not an accident. They also plan to introduce the Boosie Badass shooting as part of the case's context. Days after Mo3 was killed in November 2020, Boosie traveled to Dallas to pay his respects. He was shot in the leg while there. Prosecutors allege that the attack on Boosie was connected to the same network of violence that took Mo3's life, arguing it demonstrates how far the animosity between camps had escalated. Now here is where the story gets real complex, because Yella Beezy's defense team is not sitting down for any of this. His attorneys, Toby Shook, John Gussio III, and Michael Mola, have filed an aggressive series of pretrial motions challenging the prosecution's approach on multiple fronts. The biggest battle in the pretrial phase has been over the rap lyrics. Defense attorneys filed a motion in Limine to block the songs from being admitted into evidence, and they brought in an academic expert to make their case. Dr. Eric Nielsen, a professor at the University of Richmond who has spent years studying the use of rap lyrics in criminal proceedings, testified at a pretrial hearing on July 17, 2026, just yesterday, that jurors without hip-hop literacy are at serious risk of misreading artistic expression as confession. He compared rappers to professional wrestlers. Both create exaggerated characters designed to entertain, to project strength, to perform within a genre's conventions. Nobody arrests a wrestler for assault because of what happens in the ring. Nielsen argued that Yella Beezy, the rapper, is a character named Yella Beezy, and that blurring the line between the performer and the person behind him in front of a jury could produce a fundamentally unfair verdict. He cited a study showing that people found rap lyrics to be far more literal than the exact same lyrics presented as another genre, country for example. The words were identical, the perceived threat was not. That is a research finding with real implications for a capital case, and the defense is betting that the judge will take it seriously. Defense attorneys have also pushed back on the sheer volume of prosecution evidence, arguing that the state dumped more than 16 terabytes of discovery material, the equivalent of millions of pages, and that much of it has no relevance to Conway specifically. They have demanded the identities of informants and witnesses. They have filed motions seeking full disclosure of any deals or immunity agreements offered to cooperating witnesses. Under Brady and Giglio, those disclosures are legally required, and the defense is not willing to let any of it slip through unexamined. They are building a record at every stage. Conway has denied all involvement in Mo3's death from the beginning. His legal team's position is that the prosecution is attempting to convict the man based on rap lyrics and circumstantial financial evidence rather than proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Now let's talk about the courtroom moment that sent this story viral, because there's a significant gap between what the internet said happened and what the record actually shows. The court activity surrounding this case in early 2026 was centered on pretrial hearings ahead of what was supposed to be a February 2nd trial date. Mo3's mother, Nicole Williams, who had responded to Yella Beezy's arrest back in March 2025 by posting 2 words on Facebook, "Justice for my baby," was a presence in the proceedings. The emotion she carried into that building was documented. She had buried her son. She had waited 5 years for someone to be charged. Walking into a courtroom where the man prosecutors accused of orchestrating her son's death was seated across the aisle, that is not a neutral experience. That is one of the most difficult things a parent can be asked to endure. Here is what the internet claimed though. The claim spread across comment sections and reaction channels that Yella Beezy sat in that courtroom and laughed at Nicole Williams while she was visibly emotional. That claim became the title of this documentary. That claim generated hundreds of thousands of reactions, shares, and opinions about who Yella Beezy is as a human being. And that claim, based on every piece of credible reporting, every official court account, and every verified record of the proceedings, is not supported by documented evidence. What the record does show is that Yella Beezy did not even appear at the key pretrial hearing on January 16, 2026. His mother had died earlier that week. His legal team confirmed her passing to the court. He was home, grieving, posting 20 slides of memories on Instagram and describing her as his mama, his sister, his best friend, his world. He wrote that this was the first time she had ever disappointed him, by leaving when he needed her most. He said he would not wish the pain of losing her on his worst enemy. That is not the behavior of a man laughing in a courtroom, because he was not in that courtroom. The clip, the narrative, the viral outrage, it appears to have originated and spread in the space between the absence of verification and the presence of emotion. People who hate what Yella Beezy is accused of doing, and there are many, and their pain is completely legitimate, filled that space with what they needed to believe. The internet does what the internet does. It turns grief and fury into content. But the difference between social media and a courtroom is that a courtroom requires something the timeline does not. It requires proof. Now let's break down what the legal stakes look like going into August 24th, 2026. Capital murder while remuneration means the murder occurred as the result of payment. In Texas, that charge triggers a penalty phase where prosecutors can pursue either life in prison without parole or the death penalty. If Yella Beezy is convicted, the question becomes not whether he goes to prison, but whether he lives or dies. So the real question everybody wants answered, does he actually have a chance at beating this? Honestly, fam, it is not as simple as people think. The prosecution's case has real weight. The $40,000 cash withdrawal days before the murder is serious. The text messages allegedly sent on the day of the killing are serious. The shooter being on Yella Beezy's stage weeks before Mo3 died is serious. But weight is not the same as certainty, and the defense has real arguments to work with. The rap lyrics fight alone could shift things significantly. If the judge rules those songs inadmissible, prosecutors lose a major piece of their narrative, the part designed to show the jury who they believe Yella Beezy really is. Without the lyrics, the case leans heavily on financial records and cooperating witnesses. And cooperating witnesses are where cases fall apart. The defense has been demanding full disclosure of every deal, every immunity agreement, every benefit offered to anyone who agreed to testify. If even one of those witnesses has a credibility problem, the defense will expose it in front of that jury. The defense does not have to prove Yella Beezy is innocent. They only have to make 12 people uncertain. Given how long this investigation took, the absence of a direct confession, and the complexity of the evidence, that is not an impossible task. Yella Beezy is not walking into that courtroom on August 24th without a real shot. Whether that shot lands is a different question entirely. And fam, we cannot talk about this case without talking about what it has done to the people around it. Dallas hip-hop has never fully recovered from what happened on that freeway on November 11, 2020. Mo3 was not just a rapper to his city. He was proof that the North Side could produce something the world would listen to. that you could come from nothing in Dallas and make the whole country stop and listen. His posthumous album Shot Us for EVA was released in 2021. His 2024 project Legend dropped as his case was building in the background. His catalog has earned multiple gold and platinum certifications. Streams continue to climb years after his death. His children are growing up without their father, and his mother, Nicole Williams, has had to watch every twist in this case play out in public while carrying a grief most people will never understand. Yella Beezy's career has been in legal limbo since his arrest. He has been under house arrest with an ankle monitor, only allowed to leave home once a week for 5 hours to record music. He dropped a single called Blame It On Me in September 2025. He still has nearly 620,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. The music did not stop, but the freedom did. And depending on what happens in that courtroom in August, the music might be all he has left to leave behind. The Dallas rap community has watched all of this unfold with the complicated grief of people who came up listening to both of these men. People who have songs from both artists on their playlist right now. People who grew up in the same city, walked the same blocks, and now have to sit with the possibility that the beef they heard about in interviews and on records ended with one man dead on a freeway and another man facing the death penalty. Both artists had denied publicly that their conflict was serious. That denial sits very differently today. Real talk, fam, here is what all of this comes down to. The internet moved fast on this story. The headline wrote itself, Mo3's mom in pain. Yella Beezy laughing, that is a clip people share without asking questions. But when you pull back the curtain and look at what actually happened, Yella Beezy was not in that courtroom on the day in question. He was grieving his own mother. The viral story was built on real emotions surrounding a real case, but collapsed when you pressed it against the documented record. What is not a story, though, is the case itself. The capital murder charge is real. The $40,000 withdrawal is alleged and real. The songs prosecutors want to play for a jury are real. The man who prosecutors say pulled the trigger is in federal prison. The trial is scheduled. And Nicole Williams' pain, the grief of a mother who has been fighting for her son since November 2020, that is as real as anything in this documentary. At the end of the day, 12 jurors are going to sit in Dallas County Criminal District Court and decide whether the state of Texas has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Marquise Conway paid for the life of Melvin Noble. Not whether he rapped about violence, not whether the streets believed he did it, not what went viral on the internet, whether the evidence meets the legal standard. That is the only question that matters inside that room. And that room is where this whole story has been heading since November 11th, 2020. Whatever you believe about Yella Beezy's guilt or innocence, Mo3's mother deserved better than what the internet gave her. She deserved the focus to stay on her son, on who he was, on the 3 children he left behind. On the music the world is still playing 5 years later. Nicole Williams walked into that courtroom carrying all of that weight. She did not need a viral moment built on something that did not happen. That trial starts August 24th. We will be watching. What do y'all think happens when this hits the jury? Drop it in the comments. And if you want to go deeper on cases shaking the culture, you already know what to do.